days. And with a few seconds of my eyes opening, my brain would start churning, and this wave of shame would wash over me from the things I'd done the night before. It was a good morning if I woke up and couldn't remember what I'd done the night before. But that was just putting it off, because eventually I'd run into somebody who would have to tell me what I did the night before. And the day after Jesus was crucified, full of grief for the loss of his friend, but also full of shame. Those 3 denials must have replayed in his head like an old tape over and over and over. He must have believed without a doubt that he was no longer worthy of Christ's love. After all, how could he deny the very person that he loved so much? That brings me to my first point this morning. 3 times Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" And 3 times Peter had denied Jesus. Since here in the church we don't deal with coincidences, we can only conclude there was a reason that Jesus asked Peter the question 3 times. I don't believe Jesus was disappointed in Peter, because I believe Jesus knew all along that Peter was going to deny him. I also believe that Jesus knew that the shame and the guilt and the self-loathing that Peter was fulfilling his destiny to build Jesus' church. So 3 times Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" And 3 times Peter professed his love for Jesus. You see, this is a healing moment. Declaring his love to Jesus once for every time he denied him. Can you imagine what that must have felt like? With every "I love you," Peter must have felt the weight of that shame begin to slip off him. Reminder that there were other words that Jesus had spoken over Peter. Matthew 16:18, it says, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." You see, we have to understand, particularly in this season, that our mistakes have 0 impact on our destiny. Our mistakes have no impact on our destiny. But we have to heal from them. We have to get healthy in order to move on from them. Every new ministry, every new experience, we will pass them on to our kids and our grandkids. Not intentionally, but we will. There's nothing sadder, just like Peter, anyone. I had left a path, just a path of destruction behind me. I was like what is that guy? The Tasmanian devil. That's what it felt like. And I didn't want to hurt anybody again. So I spent a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to do things perfectly. That's a lot. We can try living like that for a while, but it's a pretty miserable existence. And I was a complete failure at the perfect thing too. So one night, I think I had just celebrated a year of sobriety, and my sponsor pulled me aside and put her arm around me, because she had this really unique gift of being able to put her arm around me and put her foot on me, gave me this said, congratulations, I'm very proud of you. And then she looked at me and she said, now go screw something up. Because what you're doing is not living. You're just staying sober. And boy, did I take that advice to heart. I made them, and I learned some really valuable lessons. If your past is what is keeping you from stepping into your destiny, or maybe even figuring out what your destiny might be, then I want to say this to you too. This is not a life. God is willing and able to set you free and heal those hurts, but you have to be willing to let go of them. We have pastors here who are more than willing to walk through stuff with you until we too can look at you one day and say, go screw something up. Peter, who made a mess of things, was the same Peter that preached at Pentecost. The same Peter that built the church. Imagine what you could do. My second point are just some words that Jesus spoke to Peter. Feed my lambs. That's what Jesus said after Peter's first, of course I love you. Seems like kind of an odd response when you're feed my lambs. It says, the verses say, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. So, what's the big deal? Isn't a lamb just a baby sheep? That was my first thought. But if you believe like I do that every word in the Bible is inspired by God and put there for a reason, you have to pay attention to things like that. Jesus had disciples. He did life with them. He taught them. He corrected them. And at first, his disciples were a lot like, they were fishermen and farmers and tax collectors. They didn't always talk nice. They were transformed. You see, Jesus is getting ready to go to heaven, and these are the very people he's entrusting them. But Jesus was preparing them for ministry. He's not telling Peter to go start a Bible study or a small group, although those are great tools that we have in the church today. He's telling the word of God. Share your testimony, live with them, eat with them, do life with them, laugh with them, and cry with them. Are you feeding the lambs that God has given you? We all have lambs, people who may or may not know Jesus. If we want to be Jesus' friend, his disciple, we have to do what he did. Disciple. It's not just the job of the pastor. Everyone who claims to be a believer should be a disciple maker. It tells us that in Matthew 28:19. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them, and when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, I am with you always to the end of the age. You know, today, I think Paul and I can probably say this, and I'm sure that most other pastors can too. We make an awful lot of excuses about why we can't disciple other people. It might be, well, I don't have it all together. Well, welcome to the club. I'm an introvert. That's my favorite. Well, guess what? You are equipped to reach other introverts like nobody else. We label ourselves right out of the very kingdom work we're called and commissioned to do. And that is why I get so upset when the people around me start putting labels on themselves that God didn't put there. In recovery, we operate a little differently. If you are one day sober, you can help the person just walked in the door, shaking and reeking of their last drink. They get you busy. You can set up a meeting and make coffee. I don't know if any of you have been to recovery meetings, but you will drink some of the worst coffee you've ever had and like it. It's all to make you a part of something bigger than you. They drag you to places. In my case, it was Howard Johnson's on Williston Road. Everyone's table, and there'd be 50 different conversations going on. And it was enough to make you crazy. You know, on one end of the table, you've got somebody saying, my wife left me, my life's over. And on the other end of the table, there's somebody saying, oh, if I have to stay with my wife one more minute. And in the middle, there'd be tears and laughter and life. I think the church could do a whole lot worse than getting a hold of some of these ideas. Because we don't need to be perfect, but we need to get busy. And while we're on the subject of lambs, what's a lamb? It's a baby sheep, right? They're so stinking cute, by the way. Dan and Viv had lambs. Oh, they were so adorable. So let's talk kids. Before we start thinking that we need to start a crusade on Church Street, you ask like what some of the most common struggles that churches have. Do you know what it is? Finding people to work in nursery or children's church to teach our kids. Teaching our kids is discipleship. Classrooms than there is up here. Be a part of that. Disciple your kids, first of all. Especially if they're walking the halls of the public schools 5 days a week. They need to be discipled. They need to know there's a better way. Number 3, 10, they become sheep. And they require tending. Ask any pastor. Right, hon? I'm not sure, but I'm fairly certain. I don't know. When my sponsor told me to go screw something up, I don't think she had any idea of the headaches I was going to bring to her door. Or maybe she did. But tending is the real work. And watering, shearing, taking care of their little feet. And those baby lambs, those cute little lambs that are born right around Easter every year. Well, just like people, those lambs come at all hours of the day and night. It's not like a C-section where you get to schedule it. They just come. Lambs get sick. And sometimes, no matter how lovingly you tend your sheep, sheep bite. In discipleship, it looks like this. Loving your now sheep in spite of the dumb stuff they do. Looking out for or who they are. Comes because it will. Walking through it all with them. Just like Jesus with his disciples. In the beginning, he kind of taught them, and he just let them watch. Sending them out that they weren't going to always get it right. But he sent them out anyway. Because he always had the bigger picture, the kingdom view. He knew these were the people that were going to build his church. And he couldn't hang on so tightly that they couldn't have the experiences that they were going to need to become good leaders, to build that church. Tend my sheep. Those words in the context of the verses that we're looking at today take on a whole new meaning. There was Peter. Jesus was gone. He felt like he'd blown it. So, do you know what Jesus was doing? I mean, what Peter was doing that morning? Fishing. Lost. He must have wanted to look at Jesus and just say, dude. But the thing is, Jesus' words, tend my sheep, they weren't demands. They're words of grace for Peter. Freedom. So much. He was saying to Peter, these are my lambs that I love. Now you go love them too. He was grieved because he said to him, love you. And Jesus said to him, it feels like they're all grown. Are you feeding the sheep that God has entrusted you with? Because that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's God's. That's not ours. It takes all the pressure off your sheep or manipulate your sheep. Stop. So, in other words, if you want healthy disciples, you need to get healthy. You need to do the work. You need to deal with your stuff and your broken places. And you need to forgive. And you need to work every day on giving your trash to God so that you can be the very best version of you possible. Because the lambs are watching. Working with someone else for a long period of time is an amazing experience. That person will eventually become a mirror for you. I can't tell you how many times I've met with someone I was discipling only to find out the person I was really ministering to was me, as much as it was them. Our God's pretty cool like that. These words spoken to Peter were also a commissioning. Jesus was commissioning Peter to stand up his church.